Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Now, just before we begin, a couple of housekeeping announcements. As well as you can see, the entire room has been refreshed. And just a reminder today that we'll be going interactive throughout the entire process. Now, I'm just going to look around the room and just want to find out whether we have any new joiners who don't already know about Pigeonhole Live. A show of hands, anyone joining us for the first time? No. Okay, so everyone's been here. You've been briefed already about how to use Pigeonhole Live. Now, just in case, for anyone who did not and was a little bit shy to put up their hands, the screen in front of you will tell you how exactly to log on to our URL, www.pigeonhole.at/SIEW2017. Of course, the password's right there as well. Now, before we move on, ladies and gentlemen, to proceed to the Singapore Energy Summit, let's, again, take a very quick poll. Now, this is the question we'll be posing to you right now. Screens in front of you, the question's right there. Which areas should we focus our efforts for the next 5 years? Which areas should we focus our efforts for the next 5 years? This is really going to be interesting to see what your thoughts are going to be like. We have 1, energy access; 2, energy security; energy efficiency; decarbonization; or all of the above. Okay, we'll take a quick, oh, there you go. We've got energy access, there you go. We have decarbonization, energy efficiency. Let's give you a couple of more minutes for this poll to really be concrete. Okay? Great that all of you are participating, ladies and gentlemen. Indeed, the platform that we'll be depending on very much so throughout the entire day. It is now time to proceed for our first session. The subject matter we're looking at is going to be rethinking energy. It is with sheer pleasure that I invite Mr. Liu Shenyia, Chairman of Global Energy Interconnection Development and Cooperation Organization, to deliver his address. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage Mr. Liu. Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to invite you to take on to your interpretation headsets. This delivery of this remarks will be done in Mandarin. Thank you.
Respected guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm delighted to attend today's summit, Energy Based on Overall Development of Human Society. This meeting, in the theme of rethinking energy, leading reform, focus on the development of energy, and it is of great importance to promote the energy revolution, achieving sustainable development. First, on behalf of Global Energy Interconnection Development and Cooperation Organization, I would like to extend my warmest congratulations on the successful convening of this meeting. GEI is committed to sustainable development and world energy and actively building a win-win platform. And in our concept spreading, planning, and research and project development, we have done a lot of work to promote this interconnection becomes an international action and a consensus. And next, I would like to talk about 2 perspectives. First is about September 26, 2015, at the UN Sustainable Development Summit, Chinese President Xi Jinping proposed the initiative of exploring possibility of a global energy interconnection to meet the global power demand with clean and green alternatives. His proposal has won a lot of endorsement and a positive response. What is GEI? GEI is a modern energy system with predominance of clean energy, centricity of electric power, interconnection, joint construction, and benefit sharing. It is an important platform. And in essence, it is the combination of smart power grid and ultra-high voltage power. And it can really be the coordination to accept the various concentrated and distributed clean energy. and to meet the needs of various customers. And the ultra-high voltage grid is the key. It can enable cross-regional, cross-country, and cross-continental interconnection of power grids. And all the energy bases can be covered in this whole grid. The clean energy is the priority, and the hydraulic energy main water basin, and the wind power at the North Pole, and the solar power in the equator, and all kinds of clean energy around the world can become the predominant energy sources. But why do we build this GEI? Building this GEI is to solve the problems of our world's energy development. Fossil energy accounts for more than 80% of the primary energy consumption. According to current development intensity, the coal, oil, and the gas reserve can only be exploited for 110 years and 50 years. Large-scale development and fossil energy has resulted in huge problems of environmental pollutions. And we can see the global surface air temperature has risen by 1%. If we don't control that, the rise of temperature will reach 4%. And we also have 1.06 billion people across the world have no access of electric power. 2.7 billion people can only cook and heat by wood, coal, and animal mature. And with this GEI's establishment, we can really solve all these problems fundamentally. To build this GEI is a strategic path to accelerate energy transformation. It can promote two replacement, one raise, and one return. And we can really break away from the constraint of energy resource. And we have two replacement, clean energy such as hydraulic power, wind power, and solar power replace traditional fossil energy. Clean electric power from afar replace coal, oil, and gas. Secondly, to raise the electrification level to lower the energy intensity. For every percentage increased use of electric power at the end consumption, the energy intensity will reduce 3.7%. And also, when return, this is to return fossil energy to its basic function as raw materials so that we can produce more value for economic and social development. In fact, economic value created by unit crude oil as a raw material is 1.6 times that of when it's used as fuel. GEI, the construction is in keeping with the law of depuration, electrification, and the networking of energy. And clean energy will become the predominance. At the end of the 19th century, coal replaced wood. So did the oil and gas replace the coal in the 60s. As clean energy grows faster across the world, the energy system is transforming into a green, low-carbon. Electrification refers to the fact that electric power is becoming increasingly important in the energy system. The share of electricity in the global end-use energy consumption has risen from 8.8% in 1971 to 18.5% in 1915, exceeding that of coal, oil, and natural gas. And it is still rising. Globally, electrification level, the highest is in Norway. It's already in 46%. Networking refers to the tendency that global interconnection and the global coal, oil, natural gas, and electric power system have all gone through a process of networking from the regional to the global distribution. GEI is an electricity-centered modern energy system characterized by depuration, electrification, and networking. It will bring fundamental changes to our industry and to have a sound assurance of sustainable development. And three, the condition to establish GEI is ripe. First, resources are now assured. The development potential is 100 trillion kilowatts. To tap in only 0.05%, will meet the needs of the entire global needs. It is just like 7.7% of total area of Sahara Desert. That is 700,000 kilometers, roughly the size of a square, with the sideline of 830 square meters that will meet the entire needs of the global electricity. And we can see the technology are improving, and we have widely adopted this technology. China is already in operation and construction of these transmission powers that's ultra high power, and it will exceed 35,000 kilometers in length with power transmission. And in the past 5 years, the cost of wind and PV power has dropped 30% to 75%, and the bid-winning price of produced by PV power and in United Arab Emirates in 2019 and 2021 prices as low as 2.4 cents and 2.9 cents. And we have a huge market demand. From 2016 to 2050, the global electric power demand estimated to increase from 24 trillion kilowatts to 73 kilowatts. That's the annual rate of 3% increase. And more than 30% will be cross-country and cross-continental transmission. GEI is internationally recognized. 140 countries across the world issued policies, formulated goals. In Norway, in India, and France, and Britain have announced the timetable to ban sales of oil-fueled vehicles, so it become a consensus of the entire world. The fourth is the total value of the GEI is enormous, and the construction of GEI will fall into 3 stages: countrywide interconnection, and continental and cross-continental interconnections. By 2015, clean energy will cover 80% of the total consumption, and the emission will be only half of that of 1990, realizing the target for air temperature rise to within 2 centigrade. The electric power supply capacity will be greatly increased, and we will solve the problem of people unable to access power. Everybody will have access to clean, safe, and efficient energy. And it will also coordinate all the continents in various zones, seasons, electricity prices, and resources. It will interconnect it to achieve efficient development and utilize of energy, clean energy, as you all know. And the electricity travels very fast. For example, in Singapore and USA, we have 12 to 13 hours difference. When we are sleeping, we can sell our electricity to USA, vice versa, and we have to do this distribution worldwide. And the electricity trade will be very beneficial to all of us. And it can promote our shifting to the competition of fossil fuel to sharing and cooperation, we can secure our energy, and trust between nations and countries will be greatly improved. International disputes and regional conflicts will be contained, and we can have common prosperity and development in the mankind. Because fossil fuel creates a lot of geopolitical issues, and we have clean energy, and it will be endless, and we can really avoid a lot of problems and even wars.
In conclusion, the global energy interconnection focus on the core mission of promoting sustainable development of the humanity. It will play an important role in the efforts to address major challenges in the global energy, economic, social, and environmental development areas. Its great significance in the implementation of UN Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development and the Paris Agreement, and in promoting development of the Belt and Road Initiative and Community of Shared Future for Humanity. And it will help the world into a global village with adequate energy, unpolluted environment, and peace and harmony. Second, energy interconnection in Asia and Southeast Asia. At present, Asia's annual energy consumption reaches 7.5 billion tons of standard coal, among which coal take up 53% of total consumption. Energy and environment problems are acute. Asia's clean energy is mainly distributed in two energy zones. The geographical location takes the form of the Chinese character for person. One energy zone is with solar energy and wind energy as the main energy form, stretches from Western Asia and Central Asia to Northeast Asia, China, Mongolia and region. And another region energy zone is with hydraulic energy as the main energy form, stretches from Pakistan, North India to Southeast China, Myanmar, Laos, and so on. And these account for 80% of Asia's total power. The building of energy interconnection is the fundamental solution to Asians' energy issues. The overall principle is to form an Asian grid connectivity among China, Northeast Asia, Southeast Asia, Central Asia, South Asia, and Western Asia, and speed up the development of clean energy in these areas. And we have to accelerate the development of clean energy in Western Asia, Central Asia, Northeast China, Mongolia, Russia, Indochina, and Malay Archipelago, and transmit electricity to Northeast Asia, Southeast Asia, and South Asia, and usher in a new phase of electricity diversion from East region to West region, and from South region to the North region, and transnational connectivity. Southeast Asia has a strategic geographic location in Asia, with Oceania to the south and South Pacific to the east and Indian Ocean to the west. It is also an important path along the maritime Silk Road and a key region of Asian global energy interconnection establishment. Accelerating the building of energy interconnection in Southeast Asia is significant in promoting a coordinated and sustainable development of energy, economy, society, and environment of countries in Southeast Asia, as well as promoting global grid interconnection and the implementation of the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Paris Agreement. First, building energy interconnection is key to addressing energy issue in Southeast Asia. The development of energy transformation in Southeast Asia is a formidable task. First, energy consumption per capita remain low, but the demand is growing rapidly. In 2015, annual energy consumption per capita in Southeast Asia is 1.4 tons of standard coal, accounting for 53% of the world's average. From 2000 to 2015, total energy consumption in the region increased by 4.1%, 2% points higher than the annual growth of the world's average. Second is that the energy fix is not rational. Fossil energy as a proportion of energy consumption account for 74%, and the installed capacity of fossil energy takes up 80% of total installed capacity. This resulted in a tight energy supply in some countries and led to environment pollution and carbon emission. Third is electricity shortage is acute. Currently, the per capita installed capacity in Southeast Asia is 0.32 kilowatt, accounting for the world's average of 39%. And in Southeast Asia, there are more than 100 people have no access to electricity, and globally there are still 1 billion people do not have access to electricity. Half of them are in Asia, and mainly in Southeast Asia and South Asia. And we have to speed up the building of energy interconnection, and also to coordinate the development, the utilization of clean energy in local and neighboring areas. In Southeast Asia, hydraulic energy, wind energy, and solar energy technology have the potential capacity of 330 million, 420 million, and 2.24 billion kilowatts. The hydraulic energy is mainly distributed in North Indochina and Kalimantan Island. The wind energy is mainly distributed in coastal area, and the solar energy is mainly distributed in central plains of Thailand. And to address the characteristics of the hydraulic power, it's abundant in some seasons and scarce in others. And both the wind energy and the solar energy are stochastic and intermittent. We must build a large-scale grid and make hydraulic energy, wind energy, and solar energy as complementary sources and to utilize them effectively. And we should strengthen the grid connectivity with neighboring countries and make good use of the domestic and regional resources and markets to achieve optimal distribution of clean energy in a wider region. This is key to resolving the energy issue in Southeast Asia and neighboring countries. And second is a vision of the energy interconnection in Southeast Asia. In developing energy interconnection in Southeast Asia, resource endowment in the respective countries should be capitalized on. The energy development strategies for each country should be considered, and we have to actively develop clean energy in member countries and accelerate the upgrading of power grid, promoting connectivity among countries such as Southeast Asia and China and Bangladesh and India, improve the optimal distribution of resources in grid capability, and to establish close domestic connectivity, efficient regional allocation, and mutual complementary in building energy interconnection in Southeast Asia. And the establishment of energy interconnection in Southeast Asia, I shall focus on three aspects. First aspect is accelerating the building of regional grid. On the basis of the geographical features of the region, accelerate the building of 4 regional AC synchronous grids, including Indochina, Myanmar, Thailand, Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, Western Malaysia, and Singapore, Western Malay Archipelago. This is mainly Indonesia West and the South, and as well Central Malay Archipelago, which is Eastern Malaysia, Central Indonesia, and Brunei, as well as the Eastern Malay Archipelago, which is Philippines, to achieve interconnection of the regional grid. Second is to enhance interconnection of the regional grids, achieving the connectivity between. Second is to enhance interconnection of the regional grids. To achieve the connectivity between Indochina and Western and Central Malay Archipelago, and the connectivity between Central Malay Archipelago and Western Malay Archipelago with submarine cable, and enlarging the electricity transmission and exchange and complementation. The third aspect is to strengthen the connectivity of the grids between Southeast Asia and the surrounding countries. To the north with China, and through the channel, the hydraulic power in Southeast China is transported to Southeast Asia to solve water scarcity in short term. And also the hydraulic power and thermal power in Central and Western China and Southeast Asia will make complementary in the mid and long term. And the second connectivity channel is with Bangladesh and India to the west. And the hydraulic power in Southeast China and Myanmar is transmitted to South Asia. And to promote economic and social development, development in the region. The third channel is with Australia to the south, using abundant solar energy that's available. Third is the key task in building energy interconnection in Southeast Asia. First is accelerate the development of clean energy base. We must make effort to develop the hydraulic energy in Indochina, including the SIEW, Mekong River Basin, and the main basin of Kalimantan Island. Develop the wind energy in southeastern Thailand, southern Myanmar, central eastern Vietnam, and coastal area of Philippines, as well as develop the solar energy in central Thailand, southeast Cambodia, and southern Kalimantan. It is estimated that by 2030, the installed capacity for hydraulic energy, wind energy, and solar energy will reach 120 million kilowatts, 110 million kilowatts, and 130 million kilowatts. This is an increase of 8 times compared to the current capacity. Second is to push ahead with transnational and trans-regional connectivity projects. Connectivity projects of China, Myanmar, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Thailand, Laos, Vietnam, Indonesia, Sumatra Island, Western Malaysia, and Eastern Malaysia, Philippines will be implemented and transmit the hydraulic power of China, Myanmar, and Laos to Bangladesh, Thailand, and Vietnam, and also transmit the electric power of Sumatra and Kalimantan to Western Malaysia, Singapore, and Philippines to realize power distribution in an expanded area. And also estimated by 2030, electricity transmission across country, region, and island will reach 50 million kilowatts. That represents 15% of electricity consumption in Southeast Asia. Third is to improve regional mechanism on power cooperation. UN and the ASEAN have played important role. Policies and regulations concerning energy interconnection in relevant countries should be encouraged to set up. Multilateral and bilateral cooperation mechanisms should be enhanced, and also to guide the research institutes, enterprises, and investment organizations to participate in research, technological innovation, investment, and construction of energy interconnection, and collectively push forward sustainable development of energy. Fourth is to build energy interconnection in Southeast Asia, which has huge value. And to build energy interconnection in Southeast Asia, we should address easy things first before the difficult ones and make progress step by step. By 2030, major national grid connectivity will be built. By 2050, a green and low carbon energy interconnection in Southeast Asia will be built. This will bring huge benefits. First is to ensure power supply. By 2050, electricity consumption in Southeast Asia will reach 3.2 trillion kilowatt hour per year, and annual per capita power consumption will reach 3,400 kilowatt hour. This is a fundamental solution to electricity shortage. Second is to promote energy transmission. The installed capacity of clean energy in Southeast Asia will account for 72%, and the generating capacity of clean energy will reach 1.9 trillion kilowatt hours. This will replace 860 million tons of raw coal and cut carbon dioxide emission by 1.7 billion tons. Third is to drive economic growth. The total investment in energy connection in Southeast Asia would be $2 trillion, and it will drive the growth of electrical infrastructure in relevant countries and accelerate industrialization and electrifications. And fourth is to promote integrated development of the region. Large grid will build huge market and expand electricity trade. Electricity importing countries and exporting countries both enjoy the benefits when transmitting electricity across the border, and it will reach 500 billion kilowatt hours, and regional political, economic, and cultural integrated development will pick up pace. Accelerating the building of global energy interconnection is a common interest of all people. Global Energy Interconnection Development and Cooperation Organization is willing to join hands with all of you to promote energy interconnection in Southeast Asia, and the whole world to accelerate the energy transformation throughout the world and contribute towards the sustainable economic and social development. Thank you.
Liu Xianchen, thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, moving on to our next presentation, and the next one is going to be a video presentation. This, of course, is the Executive Director of the International Energy Agency, or IEA. This video presentation is Dr. Fateh Birol. Do watch with all undivided attention.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to all of you. Singapore International Energy Week is one of the main highlights of the global energy calendar. Over the years, I have been lucky to attend this important gathering held in your beautiful, wonderful city. And because I know the value of your conference for the energy debate in Asia and beyond, I am very, very sorry not to be with you in person today, especially as this year marks SIEW's 10th anniversary. I am really very sorry for that. But, in fact, we are also celebrating another special anniversary today. Exactly 1 year ago, Singapore joined the IEA as an associate member country. They became a part of our family. I had the pleasure to be here at SIEW for that very special occasion. I welcomed Singapore into the IEA family in the presence of Minister Iswaran, your very dynamic Minister for Trade and Industry. In the last year, we have witnessed the vitality of Singapore's contribution to our work. This includes training several policymakers in energy efficiency and holding many events at this prestigious meeting of SIEW. I encourage you all to join our first Singapore IEA Forum, which will be held tomorrow. I have a huge delegation from IEA with you in the next few days. Among many other things, my colleagues will be launching our new Southeast Asia Energy Outlook 2017. We aim in this report to analyze the vibrant energy markets of this critical region for the global energy sector. Excellent ties between Singapore and IEA is an important part of our new strategy. 2 years ago, we have started with the modernization of the IEA, and within that strategy, we opened our doors to emerging countries, very important economies such as Singapore. Together with Singapore, we have other important countries in the region who became recently members of the IEA family as a result of our new strategy. China, India, Indonesia, and Thailand are those important countries together with Singapore in this very important region. 2 years ago, IEA family's share in the global energy mix was slightly less than 50%. And today, after having Singapore and other countries as members of the IEA family, the share of the IEA in the global energy mix is now slightly higher than 70%. So as a result of that, we believe we are much more representative in the global energy agenda. As you discuss rethinking energy, I wanted to give some insights from the report we launch tomorrow to help your discussions throughout the next week. First, Southeast Asia, India, and China, these are the three most important drivers of global energy demand growth. They altogether contribute around 60% of the global energy demand growth. And this has global implications, changing from energy security to investment trends, from investment trends to environmental challenges we are facing. We also discuss in our report that Southeast Asia must meet this fast increasing energy demand in an affordable, from the cost point of view, affordable and also sustainable way. This has implications for fuels and the technologies. As such, informed decisions are critical. Demand growth, especially for coal, oil, and gas coming from this very region, the region of Southeast Asia, has significant implications for the energy import trends of the region. Our analysis show that the import bill for oil, gas, and coal will increase, and on average, with the current policies, the region will pay each year 300 billion US dollar in order to import oil, gas, and coal. This 300 billion US dollar import bill can well be brought down. And what do we need to do this? As we discussed in our report, energy efficiency policies for cars, for trucks, electrical appliances, for boilers, for industry, homes, energy efficiency policies, plus renewable energies, solar, wind, biofuels, plenty in this region. So we can push both of them, energy efficiency and renewables, and as a result of that, this 300 billion US dollar may well come down to 120 billion US dollar as a result of the policies that we advise on a country-by-country basis in our report. Another critical issue for the region, which we discuss in our report, is the access to electricity. Since the year 2000, 170 million people in the region have gained access to electricity. And in our report, we also analyze that for those who still lack access to electricity, there are now many options. In addition to the central grid solutions, there are now growing options in terms of off-grid and mini-grid, especially making use of renewable energies in the rural areas. Declining costs of renewable energies is definitely a very important opportunity for the governments to bring electricity to their citizens. Another critical issue for this very region is the local pollution. It's an energy problem, but it has implications for health, for gender. So therefore, what we do in our report, we give some advice to governments in this region how the local air pollution can be reduced by taking measures which are not costly but necessary. Finally, I would like to tell you that we are at the IEA discussing a new topic, at least new for us, very, very vividly. What is that? Role of digitalization in the energy sector. How digitalization is affecting the demand of energy use, but also generation, production of energy. We are soon going to publish a report on digitalization and energy. In my view, it is the first attempt to bring a global picture to the impact of digitalization for the energy sector. My colleagues, the strong IEA team that will be with you in the next few days, will, I am sure, benefit, exchange ideas, suggestions, experiences with you there, and we are ready to learn from our Singaporean friends their experiences on digitalization. As we know, they belong to a top league of the countries who are pushing the agenda of digitalization in the economy and in the social life. So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, I am very sorry that I am not with you today, and I am very much looking forward to make contribution to the SIEW's future editions, and I wish you a productive, a wonderful, another SIEW meeting. And happy birthday to SIEW and their excellent organizers. Thank you.
He may not be with us right here, but of course, really nicely felt indeed. Onwards to the panel discussion, ladies and gentlemen, on the topic of rethinking energy. It is my pleasure that I invite the moderator up on stage, Professor Simon Tay, Chairman, Singapore Institute of International Affairs, and the following panelists. We have His Excellency Alfonso Cusi, Secretary of Energy of the Philippines. You've already seen Mr. Liu Chun-hia. He is the Chairman, Global Energy Interconnection Development of Cooperation Organization. Professor Masakazu Toyoda, Chairman and CEO of the Institute of Energy Economics, Japan. Mr. Neil McGregor, he is Group President and CEO, Sembcorp Industries. And finally, Mr. Peter Gore, Managing Director and Global Head of Energy and Natural Resources Industry Group, Standard Chartered. Let's welcome our panelists all with a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, shall we? We're all good, nice and seated. I'm going to hand over the floor to Prof. Tay. All yours, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, it's been a very exciting discussion so far. I think that in many ways, some of the key points could not have been possible just a few years ago. The near market parity of solar power, the disruptions in the market, and in our last speaker's talk about ability to transmit strong, clean energy across borders, across time zones. I think this is really quite transformative and potentially disruptive. So with this panel, we'll have a broader discussion. We're very lucky not only to have one of our keynote speakers join us, but a representative from the Philippine government, a Japanese think tank, the industry player from Sembcorp, and last but not least, a banker, because money for this industry, like all industries, is essential. Could I begin with Secretary Cusi, please, from the Philippines? Mr. Secretary, the Philippines is currently the chairperson of ASEAN.
Yes.
Could you share with us how your country is approaching the energy mix, the energy questions, and how you think ASEAN needs to go ahead? Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Professor Simon. Good morning to all. As far as the Philippines energy mix is concerned, we stepped away from the rigid mix of putting cap or quotas on any energy source. But instead, we adopted this policy of technology neutral approach, where we allow all the power source, the different power sources, to compete in with the objective of achieving the goal for our country. While and the ASEAN, which we just hosted, it's a commonality that everybody would like to go into the renewables. there is that they're saying that we're saying now that renewable is the present, no longer the future, but we are looking at it as renewable has to still be competitive, especially on the perspective of a developing country like the Philippines.
Secretary, if I could ask you further about your country, the Philippines. Besides being a large country with a growing population, it's also quite dispersed, it's archipelago. Are there special elements in your thinking about energy accessibility, how to provide energy across this vast archipelago of a country?
Sorry, Professor, I did.
For your country, the Philippines, besides large cities like Manila, you have a very dispersed geography, the archipelago. So are there special considerations of how the Philippines is thinking about the grid and provision of power to the very many people across the different islands?
Well, yes, we have a very unique situation in the Philippines, being an archipelago. Providing power in different islands is a logistical challenge. And the theme of this year's SIEW of rethinking energy, navigating change, is very timely for us, because from just having a national grid, we're thinking now of a distributed energy. We're thinking about that because of our situation where we are always visited by calamities, and our experience is having one national grid is a problem. So we are looking now at the distributed energy system, and of course for the remote areas, the microgrid, which I listened intensely this morning on the speech of Madam Zim. That it's being adopted here also in Singapore. I'd like to later on maybe study on how Singapore is approaching it.
So smart grids, microgrids are part of the coming structures you're thinking about?
Yes, smart grid is another step for us, because we are still improving our present national grid, and ideally we would like to have that smart grid. Considering Philippines, we have a very active energy market. Our electricity is now being traded. We have a electricity market, and we need a smart grid to support that.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. So, Ida-san, may I turn to you? Your think tank looks across the region, but even your own country has certain challenges. Japan is at once a major economy, a major manufacturer, but also reliant on imported energy like Singapore. How are you seeing the energy mix coming up in Japan?
Well, first of all, let me congratulate SIEW for the 10th anniversary. It's a great pleasure to be here. With respect to the energy policy journey, I'm happy to say that yesterday, LDP Prime Minister Abe could win a big victory in the election. This is important from the standpoint of energy policy, because energy policy needs a long-term perspective. If every government changes its destination of energy policy, there is no predictability. So thanks to the outcome of yesterday's election, we could say the present energy mix by 2030 could be maintained. And the message of the present energy mix is a balance. A sort of keyword is balance. Now, after the accident in Fukushima, we add S, safety, to the key word 3E, energy security, environment, economic efficiency. And from those four standpoints, 3E plus S we tend to think there is no perfect energy. Renewable energy is important, but renewable energy depends on our country. I think our capacity factor for solar PV is probably half of a Middle East country. And so we cannot say it can be very cheap. So the cost is a problem for renewable energy. And nuclear, yes, it's best student in the class of 3E, but safety is a problem. And so we cannot restore the confidence yet among the general public. So there is a limit. And fossil fuel, it's important, but coal is emitting quite a lot of CO2, and LNG is important. It's cleaner, but unfortunately, we have not yet created a transparent, fluid market in this region. I understand the Singapore government is trying to take leadership, and Japanese government is also cooperating with Singapore and China or other countries to create transparent, fluid market, and then we can have a comfortable Asian price index. This is important. And oil, yes, the price came down, but we tend to think it's going up again eventually. The supply-demand situation is going to be balanced, perhaps starting from next year. So we have to be prepared for that. So the balance is a key term. I think from the standpoint of ASEAN energy policy, to some extent the situation is similar. So I hope we could make some contribution to this region. Sometimes we could be a good student in energy class, but sometimes we are not necessarily a good student in the class. We make failure, we make success, and so I hope those experience of success and failure could be shared by this region.
Thank you, Toyoda-san, for reminding us how politics, Abe's recent election victory, in a way translates to one part of the energy policy, but the other balance, of course, is the people, the people who have concerns after Fukushima. May I follow one question? In Japan's view, what would the price of oil and gas do for your own energy mix towards the natural gas? How would it affect this balance you're talking about?
Well, actually, gas price is not necessarily cheap. Energy price is not necessarily cheap, even now. But say, think about 3 years ago, 4 years ago, there was a huge Asian premium. When Haley Hub was $3 per MBTU, the Asian price of energy was $18 US dollar at the time. Now it came down probably $6 or $7, and it's more comfortable. So, but we have to be very careful. At this moment, most contracts are based on oil indexation.
Yes.
So when oil price goes up, the gas or LNG price also goes up. And so the important thing for us at this moment, particularly in this region, is that we have to create a new energy Asian market, which would produce Asian price index reflecting supply-demand balance in this region. I think by doing that, the predictability will emerge, and more Asian countries can be comfortable with the price of energy.
Thank you very much, Toyoda-san. So we've heard a little bit from government as well as a think tank that really studies the broad trends and the market. I want to turn next to Neil McGregor from Sembcorp, one of the Singapore companies and a very established Genco. They're a major industry player, not just in Singapore, but in many parts of the region. In fact, Neil, congratulations, you've just signed on to one of the first early and big power plants in Myanmar, not this part of the country, but in other parts of Southeast Asia. How do you feel as an industry player, Neil?
How do I feel? I feel like we're in the right trend. When you look at what's happening around the world with changes in fintech, electric vehicles, move to analytics, the social economy coming together, aggregating capacity, efficiencies going up. This business is in a set of very powerful trends, and we're going to see a lot more growth in the future. So when you look at the economies that surround us, particularly in Asia, Asia's got the fastest growing economies in the world, somewhere between 3 and 4% in total, China at 6, but on average between 3 and 4. When you look at most of the advanced economies, only 1 to 2%. So that means demand for power, demand for energy solutions, and also a demand for competitive energy, security, and also sustainability. So as a solutions provider, the demand is definitely there. In fact, I think we're in a new decade of the electron economy, and where we'll move, where electrons and molecules and renewable solutions will have to combine together to provide the right kind of solutions. That is essentially what Sembcorp does in this market, and forms capital with capital providers as long as we have strong governance systems and the rule of law.
Thank you, Neil. Capital markets have been already referred to. There's a huge infrastructure gap in Asia and ASEAN, and part of that infrastructure, one of the major pieces is energy. Our next speaker, Mr. Peter Gao, comes from Standard Chartered Bank, a bank that develops, is across most developing countries, and particularly here in ASEAN and Asia. How do you see the picture regarding the energy sector, Peter?
Well, thank you, Professor. It's interesting to ask a banker to rethink energy because most bankers think month to month, deal to deal, or day to day. So it gives me a chance to kind of reflect on what it's going to look like over the next 20, 23 years. And it's interesting, I think you have to look at the backdrop first, is by 2040, the planet's going to look a lot different. We're going to have 2 billion more people on this planet. We're also going to have mass urbanization. We're going to go from 22 megacities, which are defined as 10 million or more, to over 100 megacities, of which 50 alone will be in China, as predicted. So, and 2/3 of that growth, as other speakers have said, is coming from the Asian market. So the question is, who's going to pay that bill? And how much is it going to be? So if you look at the statistics, that energy alone over the next 20, 23 years is going to be somewhere in the 50 trillion range. That's with the T. As a banker, I'm not even sure I know what a trillion looks like. If you took infrastructure into that play, on top of that, the bill goes up to about $100 trillion over the next 20, 23 years. So those of you who are old enough who remember the movie Jerry Maguire, the question is, show me the money. So where is this capital coming from? Well, there's good news and there's bad news. The good news is there's plenty of capital out there. You know, there's excess capital everywhere on the planet right now looking for investment opportunities. But the challenge is capital flows to the easiest and least resistant area of investment. So it doesn't necessarily flow into the 2/3 of the market growth that we're talking about at the same pace it does into the OECD markets. So how do we change that? That's one of our great challenges. At Standard Chartered Bank, we're focused on the Asia, Africa, and Middle East markets. Those are our home markets per se. But if you look at a lot of the Western investors, they have a very hard time, difficult time investing consistently in the emerging markets. So the question is, what are they looking for and how do we attract them? And who are they? First, who are they? It's a very diverse group of players now because just like the energy business is going through a transformation, the banking and the financial institution is also going through a transformation with new entries every day. So we have both public and private sector players. We have international banks, regional banks. We have private equity firms, sovereign wealth funds, hedge funds, new funds that haven't been named yet. And those capital providers are going to be the capital providers of the future. Some will be regulated, some will be not unregulated from that standpoint. But they're all looking for similar things. One, they're looking to reduce uncertainty. They know there's going to be uncertainty in most of the deals they invest in, but they want to reduce that uncertainty. So this is where the national governments come into play. You've got to create an investment environment that encourages private investment. That means clear fiscal standards. That includes honoring contracts. That includes not changing the game halfway through the game, which happens to a lot of investors. So one is limiting that uncertainty from the standpoint of the investor there. Second thing is you're going to have quality projects. I think these projects have to be very well thought out because capital is going to go toward the highest quality projects that people are investing in. You've got to provide investors with an adequate return. You can't assume that the return, that each one of those different investors have different return parameters, and you're going to have to set up an environment that gives them an adequate return. This is going to be very challenging to attract capital, but money will go where the opportunities are as long as you can reduce uncertainty and provide an adequate return.
Peter, could I ask you a further question about a pet topic of mine, green finance? This is the idea that ties to sustainability. I mean, as DPM Teo said earlier, we're reaching the point where some studies show solar power, renewables, becoming as cheap, if not cheaper than coal. But we are not there yet. People looking at energy investments today, how can finance play a role in shifting the sort of direction of investments away from the old, tried, tested, but rather dirty and carbon intensive to the new kinds of renewable and other energies we're going to need?
It's a great question. I think oftentimes we pit these two against each other. You have a choice of being green, you have a choice of being in the fossil category. I disagree with the premise. My view is each one of these are going to be key to fitting the future energy needs, and each one will have different investors or common investors. But there's no question there's momentum, clear momentum, and I've seen this over my 33-year career, into the renewable space. And that momentum's not going to stop. Financial institutions are under pressure from their own investors to make sure they're supporting a green agenda. But I don't think the green agenda and the fossil agenda are at conflict. I actually think gas is not a bridge fuel. I think gas is a solution fuel as we look at the overall fuel mix. And I think the financial markets will support both.
Thank you, Peter. We're going to take questions now from the audience and Pigeonhole or live later. Now, from Pigeonhole, one of the questions that recurred in different ways is how we do it as a region, whether as ASEAN, the immediate region around Singapore, or the broader Asia. Now, I'd like to bring in also our keynote panel speaker, Mr. Liu. Mr. Liu, you talked a great vision about how transmission lines and ultra-high transmission frequencies can allow literally a trade across borders in energy. Is that the best way to link across Asia? And gentlemen, you've talked about natural gas market, you've talked about ASEAN, you've talked about the need for a region-wide solution. So could we come to that question in different ways? How can ASEAN and Asia make interconnections and benefit from interconnections in energy? Mr. Liu, would you like to start?
Perhaps the global energy interconnection concept is not quite familiar to most of you. And let's think about it. Globally, in 30 to 40 years' time, we have built a global information internet. How can we build this information internet? It's mainly because of broadband and other technological innovation. So we are able to build a global information internet. And in the past, the energy is primarily driven by oil, gas, and also railway, and also grid. And we're using ultra HV, and we know that the transmission capacity are directly proportionate to the energy availability. So in China, we have used 10 years to build up a network, UHV network, and the transmission rate can reach 3,500 kilometers, and also the transmission rate can reach 6,000 And we can see that such capacity, so we can actually complete and provide the power capacity that's needed by the country. So in the past, what is impossible, now with ultra high voltage, we are able to build energy interconnection. So that is already possible now. So it's not just talking about it. We already have technology. So in China, we have already built 18 ultra high voltage projects, and the conversion has reached a capacity that is high. And also in Brazil, we have also built two UHV facilities, and we have technology in China, and we have already implemented in other countries, and we are building in large scale. So with this technology, I feel that in Southeast Asia, Asia as well as the whole world, we will be able to resolve the energy issue, the climate change issue, the environment issue, as well as the access to electricity. All these issues would be able to solved with this current work that we're doing. So we see that Indo-China, there's a possibility to build a grid, and also the western part of the Malay archipelago, mainly Indonesia. We can also build synchronous grid, and also the eastern side of Malaysia, we can also use a submarine cable to link all this facility, and also we can also link to Australia, where Australia can provide solar power. And that will be, so with this, we are able to solve the electricity shortage problem in Southeast Asia, and also the hydraulic power, where there's excess, we can also sell to other countries. So we can do that in Pakistan, Indonesia, China, and also Western Asia. So we can actually integrate Asia, China, Southeast Asia to the rest of the world.
Thank you very much, Mr. Liu. I think that's really a very visionary view of the world. Just a few years ago, in fact, we're still going through the period where Laos, one of our ASEAN neighbors, is trying to be a battery using hydro to sell. It's been selling to neighboring Thailand, and I think through the grids, we had a short experiment to sell to Singapore. And really, what you're talking about takes this idea much, much further. Gentlemen, could I ask you what your views are about this visionary idea of Mr. Liu's, some of the trends in the market of ultra-high frequency transmission? Or are there other ways that Asia can come together to work together? Toyoda-san, would you like to respond to that?
Well, yes. But I think two things are quite important. Clearly, interconnection in this region would help ASEAN country improve the performance in terms of 3E. Clearly, as you pointed out, Mr. Chairman, if you could import hydrogen from Laos to this region, it's going to be clean. So it's good for environment, and also perhaps it is cheaper, and so it's good for economic efficiency. And also in this region, you could share a sort of security. So clearly, it's very good. But perhaps it is not easy to achieve so swiftly. So you have to somehow overcome political issues, and also we have to think about sort of security of supply. In that regard, I think ASEAN is in a very advantageous position like EU. You have sort of already regional arrangement, and so you don't have to worry about security. And I think the energy charter, I think Mr. Liu's point is very important, but if we try to have a global interconnection, we need a sort of security of supply somehow. We cannot forget what is happening between Europe and Russia. And Russia does not enter yet energy charter. So I think energy charter is quite important from that standpoint. But ASEAN is in a very advantageous situation. You may have some political problem to overcome, but still security of supply, I think already you have done it.
Thank you. Secretary Kusi, would you like to comment about?
The last meeting of AMEM in the Philippines, we saw the signing of the cross-border sale between Laos and Malaysia. And that is a really very good development because it's actually exporting power from an indigenous power. Yes. From a source, indigenous source of power to another country that will really promote efficiency and for the country to promote also that sustainability. I'd like to cite an example in the Philippines where being an archipelago, we have a lot of islands, and it is a challenge to, logistical challenge to bring fuel to the islands. So what we are doing now is that we have an indigenous source of coal, and we are going to develop a mine mouth power plant, and then by cable connect an island. So this will bring a lot of improvement in affordability, in sustainability, in reliability. So I'm talking of, we have an island that not Marinduque, but Semirara Island. From Semirara Island, that is the source of, indigenous source of coal. So we're going to put up a power plant there and then connect by cable to Mindoro, which is around 15 kilometers in distance, and then connect to another island. There will be 3 island connection, and that will greatly help development in the country. So expanding it to the region like the ASEAN region, that will also promote development. We would like to see our country, for example, from Indonesia being connected by cable, and because we are importing coal from Indonesia. So while instead of bringing in coal, we might just cable the power and bring it to the southern part of the Philippines. We are also looking at Malaysia, the Sabah, to connect to another southern island, Palawan. So once we realize it, that would really help in the power affordability in our country.
Thank you, Secretary Kusi. That's a big vision from there, out there. How do we get from here to there? Neil, do you think the industry players are ready for this transformation and the sort of big vision that's coming up?
I think we're ready for it. There are already examples of a model existing in Europe where interconnection goes across to the UK and also to Scandinavia, and that works well. But like the various participants here have said, there has to be a political will, but there also has to be a common framework and a common set of standards. I think the big challenge today for industry players is not all grids are the same, and yes, they're at different stages of maturity. In a mature grid, you can do many things, but in one that is in early development and is not fully integrated or interconnected, the supply solutions will be different. And that is where one of the challenges comes in terms of renewables, because renewables, solar plus batteries or wind plus batteries, enables consumers to disconnect. And if they disconnect, who's going to bear the cost of the grid? In terms of you talking about grid solutions and interconnection and developing around the world, yet there are also trends going in the opposite direction. So that comes down to a matter of policy, I think government policy in terms of making the framework and the rules of the game very clear, because investors like us and solution providers, we put in place a solution for 20, 25 years, and the banks come in behind that, and they have expectations on collateral. and risk, the same as we do. So whilst the solution may be different, the factors that behind that are the same, and they come down to regulatory framework and having the right kind of policies in place that support the future development.
What I think Neil described to me, Peter, is a kind of flux situation where they're both opportunities but real risks. I mean, with the technology change and the grid change, plus the pressure from climate change and of sustainability factors, are there the dangers of stranded assets, whether it is the old kind of technologies or investing in the wrong kind of grids that seem to make sense now but could look silly, 5, 10 years from now?
I have a lot of confidence in the ability of the market to kind of wash this out over a period of time. What would scare me on the stranded asset if there was a sudden change or a sudden directive that suddenly made certain assets obsolete when you're in the midst of an investment program or you haven't finished the 20-year cycle. That would frighten the financial markets very much. But the financial markets are very efficient in dealing with stranded assets, and we've seen it in industries like real estate and others. So the stranded asset issue doesn't worry me as much. I think one of the things Neil said, and which is very intriguing, because I think there is a generational change going on in corporations in terms of management teams. What we're seeing is a much more innovative set of management teams, and you're seeing what is called older industries now adapting. I mean, look at Shell's recent announcements on renewables. 10 years ago, when the big oil companies would talk about renewables, it was more for commercial reasons than anything else. It's no longer that way. Shell, Total, Statoil are very, very serious about playing in the renewables game, and they can really transform the next investments in the renewables game because they come with such strong balance sheets. You're even seeing the US big oil starting to have similar vibes in them. I think the management teams that change to the new business model, and I guess the question is, what is that model? But the new business model is emerging, are the ones that are going to be the most successful. Those who stick to the past, their father's energy company, aren't going to exist in 10, 15 years. That's just a reality because the market is moving so fast. There's an accelerator effect in this industry right now. It's an accelerator effect on innovation, which is happening every day in this sector, but there's also an accelerator effect on decision making and speed. And I think that is why I always say to young bankers, we don't provide capital to companies, we provide capital to people who run companies. And you better know those people pretty well.
Thank you. We're almost out of time. One question that really asked here is about pricing. Both generally, how do you price across countries when we're trying to interconnect? I mean, even here around us, there are countries that subsidize energy and others like Singapore who believe that, you've got to flush out the costs. The second is that, and collect the price, is carbon tax. I asked this question particularly because, where when SIEW just a few years ago was dealing with, the world end when the price per barrel seemed to be approaching $200. We're down to about 60-something now, 50-something. What do you think the pricing effects could be from either trying to link up between differently priced economies, putting in a carbon tax and perhaps unevenly, or another price shock? And that, I think, is a way to ask you to kind of look forward and close off with some thoughts about the variety of issues you're dealing with. Toyota-san?
Well, I think carbon pricing in general, there are two things. One is sort of emission trading, and another is carbon tax. As far as I'm concerned, I support carbon tax idea. If you raise the carbon tax too high, that would affect the competitiveness of this country. And so I think what the Singapore government is trying to do is very rational. Actually, Japan introduced the carbon tax already, and the tax level is, at this moment, maybe $3 per ton. And so I think it's not too expensive, but the important thing is by doing that, we could have a revenue. I think revenue raising is quite important in order to provide a sort of incentive for R&D, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think carbon tax is a very good choice for most governments to promote R&D as well. Now, emission trading, I think maybe European experience is there, but now I think it's fluctuated quite a lot. And so that might damage a sort of predictability. And so in the case of Japan, we tend to support carbon tax.
Neil, would you like to come in on this?
Well, carbon tax is really, as the Minister pointed out earlier this morning, is about behaviour and how to signal behaviour and reaction. I think in the medium term, carbon tax is fine. It pressures the market to adapt and also to become much more competitive. And one of the ways we can do that is through centralised utilities as opposed to pure play market. So just not power, just not gas on its own, but it's the combination and all of the products that can be developed in line, whether it comes to cooling, whether it's steam for heating, production of water, or even in the future the production of hydrogen. All of these things will come in and they make a difference in terms of your market position and the efficiency and the type of technology that is employed as you go forward. But there is a balance, and that a carbon tax is also support for renewables, because as you make conventionals more expensive because of the carbon emitters, then it means that renewables become more competitive in terms of pricing. But the result of that is there is an impact on the grid. And although the mix, the production mix here in Asia, and particularly Singapore, is low, but once you start getting to a mix of around 30 to 40%, then there is quite a large challenge in terms of grid infrastructure and investment and how you actually balance conventionals, fast-acting conventionals, which means gas in the future, and renewables because of the intermittency side that has to be dealt with. So it means markets actually change from markets that are priced on pure electrons to markets that are priced on capacity and solutions.
Okay.
What a shocker. The banker on the panel is more market-driven. It's not I'm against carbon tax. I think that like any other tax, it has to be there for a certain period of time and has to have a twilight. I think sometimes the embedded tax stays forever. I think certain industries do need an incubation period, and they need a transition period in order to establish themselves. We certainly saw that in wind, but as we see now, wind is a highly competitive price, so a lot of the subsidies associated with wind have fallen off. So I think that's a great success story on subsidies. But I often, I caution about the unintended consequences argument. I mean, just to give you a quick, small example, is California has the highest number of electric vehicles, for instance, and but their gasoline usage is up. How do you explain that? Well, it's human behavior. Gasoline prices are lower, people are driving more. So I think one has to be careful about trying to manipulate the market too much, but I understand the need to have a transition period to get industries off the ground.
And to sort of signal the future direction. Now, Secretary and Mr. Chen, Mr. Liu, I want to bring you in, but I want also to ask the floor whether anybody would like to ask a question in real life. I mean, I've been sort of amalgamating the pigeonhole questions into, I think, something you could recognize about prices for markets. Would anyone like a microphone to ask a specific question to one of the specific speakers? No? Oh, yes, please. Over here, please. Gentleman in the front row here. Philippe, would you introduce yourself to everybody and quickly?
Yes, hi.
Yes.
Thank you very much. My name is Philippe Wind. I work for Actis. We are a private equity investment fund. We are very active in emerging countries. but unfortunately not that much in the region. My question is the following. What is your opinion in terms of opening to private investors in the electricity, energy distribution and generation? Do you believe it will be increasing, or that the markets in the region will remain a little bit more protected and government?
Thank you, Philippe.
Yeah.
In a period of transformation and change technology, how do we see the utility space? Is it going to be more state-driven? Will the private sector, private investors come in much more, and do we need them? Is that a good closing question? Secretary, would you like to start?
Thank you, Professor Simon. I think there will be more investment, especially talking from the perspective of the Philippines. As innovation comes into play, it requires investment. And based on the projection of the increased demand for power, for energy, that requires investment and putting the infrastructure ahead of this demand. Especially talking from the Philippines, like for example, we are projecting that by 2040, we will be needing additional from this period, we will be needing additional of 43,000 megawatts power. And that's why in every country that I visit, I always ask for investment. No?
Well, please talk to Neil after this. Any other questions or comments about the role of the private sector? In Japan, how do you think utilities have managed to sort of recover and shift?
Well, you may know Japan has completed market reform, liberalization, both in electricity sector and gas sector. But still, we tend to think market mechanism is not perfect. For instance, in terms of extension of a grid, in terms of extent of transmission line, I think the government is allowing a transmission company to construct a grid on the basis of cost-based pricing. And if simply we rely on market mechanism, I think nobody tries to take that risk. And also, good example is that upstream investment. At this moment, the price comes down, and maybe it's a good opportunity for companies to make investment, but I think there is a so unpredictability here. And so government may support a company to increase their investment. So I think the balance between market mechanism and government law is quite important.
I'd like to give the last word to Chairman Liu, but before that, Chairman, could I ask Neil and Peter whether you have any more comments about this point of the private investor, the private sector coming in to play more of a role? Neil?
I think the market's open, and certainly we're all looking for solutions. None of us have balance sheets big enough in order to provide all of the power growth that is required within the region. So everybody has their part to play. And right now, the market is flush with money, and a lot of investors, whether they are funds or whether they're other institutions, already exist in this business, and I think there's room for more to come.
So it's a growing pie, and different segments of the pie have different needs.
Yes.
Some of them will be private sector, some will be more development banks and governments, etc.
Correct.
I think it fundamentally has to be a partnership. And I think, during good times, nobody really wants to be a partnership. And then when it's bad times, everybody wants to be a partner. And then they go back to their neutral corners. But I think the reality is the private and the public sector, to meet the needs to 2040, have to work in tandem. And a partnership has to be equal. And that means that the governments have to be willing to invite private sector players both for their expertise and their investment opportunities. And I think there are some players, private equity players, who are better equipped to manage the risk of certain parts of the business. But it's not a winner take all. It's got to be a true partnership to bridge the gap.
Thank you, Peter. And the last word to Chairman Liu of China and Guideco. If I could ask you, in your broad vision, how do you see the role of the private sector and so many different governments playing a role?
Energy transition and also clean energy has a lot of opportunities for our private sectors. It is not a mandatory task from the government. Why do I say that? I would like to give you some examples. For example, and we have the largest hydraulic power plant. It's not in Brazil, not in China, it's in Africa. If we can develop that hydraulic power, I have calculated that its cost is about 2 cents US dollars. If we transmit it to Europe, it's about 6,000 kilometers, and it's also 2 to 3 cents of US dollars. And so if we use all the costs add together, is very cheap, and the spot price in Europe will be 6 cents. And we can know in Germany, industrial cost is about 15 cents, and residential is 25 cents. So if we transmit it to Europe, we can gain a lot of profit. So this is a very commercial type of investment. So I believe this is not coming from government. This is a very important investment opportunity for private sectors. I would like to also talk about another issue. It's about carbon tax. This is not the perfect choice. It is a choice because we all know its function. However, its disadvantage is to contain the development of our companies and society. So I believe energy's transition is to establish interconnection and to develop, but not to stop, using the method of stop. However, I believe that carbon tax is an important option. However, we have to keep adjusting it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much, panelists. With that, my apologies for finishing a bit late. Please ask you to join me in thanking the panel for a very interesting discussion. Thank you.
And thank you, Prof. Tate, for moderating. I think he deserves a round of applause as well, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. It was a very nice one, sir.